Hello, this is the first in a short series of videos from me working through a Frontend Mentor challenge, and I'm going to do this order summary component here, which is a newbie grade challenge, so it's pretty straightforward, but I wanted to take something small and do it in a really thorough way rather than pick one of the larger or more complex challenges, which in my experience when I try and do those I don't have enough momentum to complete it alongside my day job and I run out of steam. So my aim here is to kind of rubber duck this process to myself and try and be more methodical, I guess, or to identify where I go wrong in my thinking when I'm doing these things. I've got an annual pro subscription to Frontend Mentor, so I'm going to be working from the Figma file that provides. Part of this whole process for me is getting better with Figma, so I'm going to include some learning points along the way about that. And the first thing I'm going to do is just really analyze this to the nth degree to try and get a grip on what I'm going to be doing. So starting with the name of the thing, it's an order summary component, and that sets the tone for the whole exercise really, because if we're talking in terms of components, then we need to be thinking about reusability and composability. Either I'm working with an existing component library when I make this thing, or this is going to be the first step towards creating a component library. So I need to be thinking about what the subcomponents are that this order summary might consume, but also how anything I build for it might be reused in other contexts. So what does that mean? Well, while the end product of this exercise is an order summary card, I've broken the design down into 5 distinct components that compose together to create the overall implementation. First of all, we've got the background, which is just a minimal context for displaying the order summary card that we're really making. It's not part of the task at hand really, it's sort of window dressing, but it's still designed and it has its own responsive behavior, so I'm going to give it its own treatment and make sure it's robust and it's not coupled to its contents. The next component is the card, and that's the outermost wrapper or frame, if you like, of the component that I'm building, but it's not inherently connected with the content it's going to contain in this instance. This kind of card is a really common pattern. It could be put into all kinds of different uses that have nothing to do with order summaries. So it makes sense to consider it as a sort of presentational concern that's distinct from whatever we put into it. The annual plan looks to me like a subcomponent that could be used in other contexts, and it feels like I might just be pulling it into this composition, so again I'm going to build it as something independent of the card. And of course buttons are the go-to example of a design element that's going to be reused multiple times across an app or a website, so it's a real atomic subcomponent that has its own life, so to speak, outside of the order summary. Now I said there were 5 subcomponents and we've looked at 4, so what's left? Well, this is where things get interesting, to me at least, and this is where I'll emphasize that this video is about where I've ended up in my approach, and I'm not proposing it as any kind of accepted best practice or anything. But if we take away all those other components that I've just mentioned, this is what's left. And if it seems hard to define this as a component, I don't think that's an accident, because while at first glance this card looks like the root of what we're building, to me it's actually the order summary, which is a combination of layout and content that forms the core identity of this overall component. This is the gravitational center around which the card wraps and into which the subcomponents like the annual plan and the button fit. Okay, so having said all that about components and subcomponents and whatnot, when it comes to implementing this, I'm not actually going to use a front-end framework like React or Vue or even Svelte, because unless I actually want to learn about those tools, it's complete overkill for the thing that we're making just now. We only need static HTML and CSS files to complete the challenge. We don't need to mess about with JavaScript or build steps or anything like that. So in my mind, there's this little scenario for what we're doing, and it's basically that I'm working for some wee moonshot startup that's trying to get a slice of Spotify's market share. And all our development resource has gone into the app so far, so we need to get our marketing website up and running ahead of the initial launch, and maybe that's in 2 days or something like that. So it's time sensitive. Maybe down the line we're going to re-platform the website to a front-end framework that'll integrate with the app, but for now we just need something simple and performant. It's got to be thematically consistent with the product, but it doesn't need to be a UI framework. But it's still going to be useful for us to build this out as if we were doing it in a front-end framework as much as possible. I'm going to build the components separately, broadly speaking, in order of highest to lowest value, and I'm going to consider the mobile and desktop responsiveness at a component level as I go along, so that ultimately we should be able to compose these subcomponents together at the last stage and it'll all just work